Imagine walking through just a vast, silent wasteland of completely black sand.
Right.
I mean, you're in the Karakum Desert, which is this massive, punishing expanse that covers nearly 70% of Turkmenistan.
Right.
And there are no towns, no roads. It's just miles of empty, scorched earth. And then suddenly, the ground simply opens up.
Just out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
You find yourself standing at the very edge of a roaring, glowing crater, roughly the size of an American football field. I mean, it's almost 70 meters wide, 30 meters deep, and it's radiating an absolute wall of intense, punishing heat.
It's hard to even picture.
It is. And out of the earth, there are hundreds of these smokeless flames, and they're just burning endlessly, violently against the dark sand.
It's an incredibly striking image. And, when you realize you're looking at a fire that has been burning in the middle of a barren desert for over half a century, it just feels completely surreal.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive, where you're looking at a stack of incredibly fascinating sources today. We've got scientific expedition reports, explorer journals, and geological dispatches. And this is all to understand what the locals call Karakum Yalkami, the desert flame.
Right.
But I think most of the world knows it by a much more intimidating name, which is the door to hell.
Yeah, that name definitely sets a tone. And as we unpack this material for you today, we aren't just looking at some bizarre geographical anomaly. We are going to explore an unbelievable convergence of Cold War secrecy, biology operating at the absolute extremes of physics, and some truly surreal modern political maneuvering.
Oh yeah, the politics are wild.
Definitely. But as we go through this, we want you to keep one central theme in mind, and that is the unpredictable, often entirely uncontrollable consequences of human intervention in natural systems.
Okay, let's unpack this. I mean, how does a hole the size of a football field just catch fire and never, ever stop?
Well, to understand the mechanics of the door to hell, we have to look at how it supposedly got there in the first place. And that plunges us straight into a very tangled, deeply murky web of historical records.
The official account is essentially a disaster movie. So the widely accepted story goes back to 1971, right in the middle of the Soviet era.
Right.
And engineers were out in the Karakum Desert, aggressively exploring for natural gas deposits. They were looking for that subterranean wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So they set up their massive drilling rig, thinking, they've hit a straightforward, lucrative pocket of gas.
But the geology beneath them wasn't a neat, contained pocket at all. I mean, it was basically Swiss cheese.
Wow.
Yeah, they unwittingly drilled right into the fragile limestone roof of a massive subterranean cavern. And when you pierce a pressurized cavern like that, the pressure equilibrium instantly shifts.
Makes sense.
The upward pressure holding the rock in place just vanishes. And if the surrounding stone is friable, the structural integrity of the entire roof just gives out.
Which means the desert floor effectively vanishes. It collapses completely, swallowing their entire operation. I mean, the heavy drilling rig, all their scientific equipment, the campsite, it all just drops into this sudden abyss.
And suddenly, instead of a controlled gas well, these engineers are staring down a gaping sinkhole. And it is rapidly venting massive quantities of highly combustible methane gas directly into the atmosphere.
And methane is no joke. The sources note the engineers were absolutely terrified that this invisible toxic cloud would drift over the sand dunes and suffocate the nearby nomadic villages.
Exactly.
So they huddle up and make a shockingly blunt decision.
Mm-hmm.
They figure the safest, most efficient way to handle a massive, invisible poison cloud is to simply burn it off.
Right, just set it on fire.
Yeah. They toss a flare in, that's assuming the methane will burn up in a few weeks. The pressure will drop, and they can pack up and go home.
Which is quite the assumption.
Right. And that was over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
It's exactly like a DIY home renovation gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to fix a leaky pipe in the basement, accidentally hit a gas main, and decide the absolute best solution is to toss a lit match at it and wait for it to sort itself out.
Exactly. You just assume your house will stop burning by Tuesday.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of the miscalculation. But what's fascinating here is that nobody actually knows if that official story is true.
Wait, hang on. I'm completely confused here. How do you just lose the true origin story of a giant flaming crater? I mean, satellites existed in the 70s, nomads lived in the desert. Surely someone kept a record of a roaring inferno opening up.
You'd think so, right? But you have to consider the intense psychological and political environment of the Soviet Union at that time. Look at the culture of their industrial expansion.
Yeah.
Any project involving strategic natural resources like oil, gas, uranium was heavily classified. Information was strictly siloed. Yeah. If you were a regional director and your team just swallowed a multi-million-dollar drilling rig into a sinkhole, that wasn't just an oops moment. That was a failure that could result in severe punishment.
So they just buried the paperwork.
Effectively, yes. And we should point out here for you listening, we're strictly imparting the accounts of state secrecy as detailed in these sources. We aren't taking any political stance on historical Soviet policies.
Right, absolutely. Just reporting what the documents say.
Exactly. But looking objectively at how tightly information was controlled in those records, maintaining the illusion of infallible state engineering was often deemed far more important than scientific transparency.
Wow.
So any historical record that painted national efforts in a negative light or highlighted a massive costly blunder was eradicated or simply never filed.
That is wild.
It really is. The reality uncovered by Canadian explorer George Krunis and local Turkmen geologists suggests a completely different timeline. They found evidence suggesting the crater actually formed a full decade earlier in the 1960s.
Oh, wait, a full decade?
Yeah. And it just sat there, unlit, quietly venting gas until someone finally ignited it in the 1980s.
A 20-year discrepancy. The fact that the scientific data is so messy just because of pure bureaucratic self-preservation is bonkers. But because those origins were totally shrouded in missing data, the only way for modern science to actually understand the mechanics of this crater was to do something pretty unthinkable.
Right.
Somebody had to physically go inside it.
Which brings us back to George Krunis. Because in 2013, he decided to become the first human being to descend to the bottom of the door to hell.
The preparation for this in the sources is just mind-blowing. They detailed 2 full years of meticulous planning, designing, and testing just to secure a mere 17 minutes at the bottom of the crater.
2 years for 17 minutes. The mechanical logistics of pulling this off are staggering. I mean, you can't just rappel down on a standard nylon rope.
No, definitely not.
He had to be encased in a highly specialized, multi-layered, heat-reflective suit. It's similar to what volcanologists wear near lava flows. It has this aluminized outer layer that physically bounces the radiant heat away from the body.
That makes sense.
And underneath, he wore a self-contained breathing apparatus, because the bottom of that pit contains zero breathable oxygen. It's literally a suffocating mix of raw methane and carbon dioxide.
And the ropes. The sources mentioned they had to build a custom climbing harness and use Kevlar, fire-resistant ropes, because standard carabiners or metal riggings would literally heat up, melt the safety lines, and just drop them into the fire.
It's terrifying just thinking about it.
It really is. But looking at all this prep work, I have to ask the obvious question for everyone listening. Why on earth would someone risk 2 years of their life, and frankly risk being incinerated, just to stand in an inferno for 17 minutes? I mean, what are you possibly gaining down there that you can't measure from the rim?
Well, he was mapping an environment that shouldn't exist. And Krunis' own sensory descriptions of the descent are fascinating because they highlight just how alien it is.
Okay.
He noted that from the rim, it looks like a fire. But as you descend, the acoustics completely change. He described the sound of the smokeless flames as a high-pressure, jet-like roar.
Woo!
Yeah, he actually compared it to the sound of demons growling, because the grass is being forced through porous rock under immense subterranean pressure. It's not a lazy campfire. It's thousands of high-pressure blowtorches.
He said it was exponentially scarier, hotter, and vastly larger than anyone could comprehend without being inside it. But the sheer terror of that descent makes what he actually found down there so much more profound.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he wasn't just down there to take some temperature readings and look at rocks. He was down there looking for life.
Oh.
And the craziest part? He actually found it.
The scientific payoff of those 17 minutes was extraordinary. They discovered extremophile bacteria living in the dirt right amongst those high-pressure flames.
I need a breakdown of this because how is anything biological surviving next to a 400-degree blowtorch?
Right. It sounds impossible. But to understand why this is so groundbreaking, we have to look at the cellular mechanics of extremophiles.
Okay.
These are organisms specifically adapted to thrive in conditions that would instantly dismantle standard biology. Inside this crater, you have a very specific, highly volatile cocktail. You've got intense heat, continuous raw methane, trace moisture in the deeper soil, and a little bit of oxygen creeping in from the surface.
So what exactly is living in that cocktail?
Scientists identified simple organisms, mostly methane oxidizers, thermophiles, and spore-forming bacteria. Now, normally, if you expose biological proteins to extreme heat, they denature.
Like frying an egg.
Exactly. Think of what happens when you fry an egg. The clear liquid turns white and solid because the heat unravels the protein structures permanently. If you or I stood at the bottom of that crater, our cellular proteins would unravel in seconds.
Oof, horrifying. But these bacteria don't fry.
No, they don't. Thermophiles possess naturally tightly folded proteins that essentially act like thermal armor. Their molecular bonds are rigid enough to withstand the heat without melting or unraveling.
Wow.
And the methane oxidizers.
Hmm.
They are literally utilizing the raw methane gas and the extreme thermal energy to fuel their metabolic processes. They rip apart the methane molecule, use the carbon to build their microscopic cellular walls, and extract energy from the chemical bonds.
So they are literally eating the fuel that powers the inferno around them.
They are actively thriving on it. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this radically expands our baseline understanding of habitability.
How so?
Well, if complex bacterial life can rapidly adapt to a synthetic inferno created by a clumsy 1970s drilling accident, it dramatically shifts the parameters for where we might find life on other planets. Environments in our solar system, like certain methane-rich moons or planets we previously dismissed as too hot or too toxic, might actually be prime real estate for these exact kinds of extremophile ecosystems.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
It totally redefines what a habitable zone actually means.
It really does.
But, okay, while we're talking about life adapting to the crater, I have to bring up the absolute creepiest detail in these field reports.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, because it's not just microscopic bacteria down there. They found spiders. Hundreds of spiders intentionally crawling toward the extreme heat at the rim of the crater.
It is a phenomenal example of an ecological chain reaction.
Really is. The reports explain that the intense glow of the flames at night acts like a massive beacon for desert insects. Insects use transverse orientation, meaning they navigate by keeping a distant light source, like the moon, at a constant angle.
Right.
But a giant artificial glowing crater completely scrambles their navigation. They end up spiraling directly toward the light. And the local spiders, sensing this massive concentration of confused prey and drawn by the ambient warmth radiating into the freezing desert night, they congregate right at the edge of the pit.
It's quite the setup.
It's like a twisted desert oasis. Instead of drawing animals to a cool watering hole, it's drawing spiders to a giant flaming bug zapper.
Exactly. It's a giant flaming bug zapper, and those spiders are just waiting at the base of it to catch whatever gets dazed by the heat and falls down. It perfectly illustrates how quickly and ruthlessly nature will exploit a new, continuous energy source, even one as violent as an industrial gas fire.
Nature finds a way. So we have extremophile bacteria eating the methane. We have spiders setting up an all-you-can-eat buffet at the rim. I mean, the desert wildlife has completely integrated the crater into its survival strategy.
Completely.
But while nature adapts, human politicians are still frantically trying to figure out how to control it. Which brings us to the bizarre modern-day reality of the site.
Yeah, the crater has essentially taken on a strange secondary life as a backdrop for high-stakes political theater.
The anecdotes in the sources are wild. The former ruler of Turkmenistan, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, had this oddly mythic, highly publicized relationship with the site. A few years ago, rumors were swirling internationally that he had died or fallen seriously ill.
Right.
So to dispel these rumors and to project an image of absolute vitality, he literally took a rally car out to the Karakum desert and did donuts around the fiery edge of the door to hell.
It's just a remarkable visual. He used the sheer visual intimidation of the crater to project personal power, and his administration followed that up in 2018 by officially attempting to rebrand the site.
Oh, the rebranding.
Yeah, they mandated changing its name from the ominous door to hell to the much more optimistic shining of Karakum. And again, just to explicitly note for you listening, we're neutrally reporting these political actions from the Turkmen government as stated in our sources. We're not endorsing or condemning the administration.
Exactly, just sharing the facts from the deep dive. But right, changing the name on a tourist map is somehow going to make people forget that there is a terrifying roaring pit of fire swallowing the desert.
It's a classic public relations strategy. If you can't fix the disaster, rename it and claim it as a glittering national monument.
But regardless of the rally car stunts or the optimistic rebranding, the government is actively, desperately trying to make it go away behind the scenes. At a recent scientific conference focused on hydrocarbon development, the director of the state-owned energy company, Turkmengaz, Irina Lureva, announced they are finally making headway.
That's significant.
Yeah, she claimed there has been a nearly threefold reduction in the fires.
Which, if accurate, represents a massive shift in the crater's lifespan. And we have to look at the incredibly practical motivations driving this sudden push to close it. First and foremost is the environmental reality. Methane is an exceptionally potent greenhouse gas. Its warming potential is vastly higher than carbon dioxide. Even when it is burning in the crater, the emissions are severe. And the invisible, unburned methane escaping from the surrounding fractured rock into the atmosphere is a massive public health liability.
Not to mention the pure financial hemorrhage. I mean, they are an energy exporting nation. They are literally watching a highly valuable natural resource burn away into the sky 24/7 for decades, instead of capturing it, piping it, and selling it.
Exactly. It's literally money going up in smoke.
But, I mean, after 50 years of failure and presumably countless unrecorded attempts to put this thing out in the past, can human engineering actually turn off a subterranean fire of this magnitude? How do you even begin to cap that?
This raises an important question regarding the limits of human engineering against the sheer scale of subterranean natural gas reserves, because that is the ultimate engineering hurdle. You can't just drop water or chemical retardant on it. The intense heat evaporates it before it even reaches the source, and the gas pressure just pushes right through whatever is left.
So what's the mechanism? Do they just, like, plug the hole?
Far more complicated than that. To actually extinguish it, you are battling the sheer geological pressure of the Earth. You would likely have to drill multiple directional relief wells, angling down miles away from the crater to intercept the gas source deep underground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then you have to siphon the gas away faster than it naturally rises, essentially starving the crater of fuel from below. Alternatively, you pump incredibly dense drilling mud into the fractures to physically block the gas pathways with sheer hydrostatic pressure. But remember the Swiss cheese geology we talked about earlier.
Right, the rock is already fragile and fractured.
Exactly. If you pump high-pressure mud or concrete into a fragile, collapsed cavern system, you risk fracturing the rock even further.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you might plug the main crater, only to force the high-pressure gas to break out in 20 new, uncontrollable vents scattered all across the desert floor. They might be able to reduce the pressure threefold, but fully extinguishing it requires out-engineering the Earth itself.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at an isolated flaming hole in the sand, but it's really this sweeping narrative.
It really is.
It begins as a Soviet engineering disaster born from Cold War pressure, completely scrubbed from the historical record to save face. Then, entirely by accident, it transforms into a booming, impossible habitat for thermal armored bacteria and heat-seeking spiders. And today, it's a political prop for dictators doing donuts, while engineers desperately try to put the genie back in the bottle to save their greenhouse gas emissions.
It is the ultimate monument to human hubris. For you listening, the primary takeaway is incredibly humbling. It is a stark reminder that when we blindly pierce the earth to extract what we want, without fully understanding or respecting the delicate mechanisms of what lies underneath, well, the Earth generally wins.
Yeah.
It doesn't conform to our engineering schedules, it ignores our political rebranding, and it certainly doesn't care if it ruins our profit margins.
It just keeps burning.
Exactly. But before we finish up today, I want to leave you with one final, deeply paradoxical thought to mull over. And this stems entirely from the biological discoveries Coronis made down there.
Okay, what is it?
If those unique extremophile bacteria have spent the last 50 years rapidly evolving, multiplying, and perfectly adapting to thrive in this highly specific, entirely artificial inferno, what happens to that unique, newly evolved ecosystem if the engineers actually succeed in starving the fire?
Oh, wow. They would instantly freeze and starve?
Precisely. It creates a fascinating ethical dilemma. Do we have a right to actively destroy an entirely unique, flourishing ecosystem that we accidentally created simply because we finally figured out how to clean up a 50-year-old industrial mistake?
That is a wildly heavy question to walk away with. What a perfectly unexpected way to look at it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. Building these deep dives and unpacking the strange realities of our world is what we love to do. If you enjoyed exploring the door to hell with us today, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you never miss our next deep dive into the unknown.